One of the biggest changes coming to Dead by Daylight in the next update is the removal of stacking for haste and hindered effects, which is going to completely kill a lot of meme builds, and it is going to make certain characters, like Clown and Singularity, not as synergistic with haste perks. So as a massive haste builds fan, I decided to test these changes in the PTB, and after watching many other content creators, I have come to the conclusion: the changes are not that bad, and they will be better for the future of the game. However, there needs to be significantly more changes than the ones presented in the PTB, and these changes also set a dangerous precedent for the future. So let's talk about it. The reason why the devs did these changes are pretty simple, and they even told us why in the developer diary. Some haste perks are okay when played alone, but when stacked, they become a problem, as proven by Made for This and Hope, which was a combo that made weak M1 killers very bad once the last generator was repaired, as it gave them a 10% haste boost when paired. The game is balanced around survivors running at 100% speed, and killers running 15% faster, and that is why there are also other killers with different movement speeds as part of their balance, like Chucky being 110% due to being smaller, or Nurse being slower than survivors due to her insane chase ability. Another problem of haste perks is that it is an insidious effect, and by that I mean that you won't know when a killer has haste unless you are very experienced at the game and you know the effects of all perks. For example, if you see a Myers chasing you and dropping you when you are the obsession, then it is clear that the killer has played with your food. But how would you know if a Houndmaster or a Vecna decided to run Rapid Brutality? Or how would you know when a Trapper has batteries included? This same problem is applied for killer players. If you were in this situation, you might think that Kate is not legit, but all she did was stack Power of 2 with Blood Pact, and her teammate was hiding behind a wall. I know this because I have thousands of hours in the game, but a new player might genuinely think that this player is a cheater. So, by removing all sorts of haste and hindered stacking, the developers achieve various things with this change. Now, players have to learn less perks than before, as instead of having to pinpoint how the characters get a speed boost individually, players can tell the haste perks with experience, just like a killer player can tell which exhaustion perk the survivor is running. The perks can now be balanced accordingly without taking into account broken combos, so each haste perk will be individually stronger. This could even lead to more build variety in the long run. And the third, the most important one, and the one that Arinat, the Prestige 100 Clown main, made me reflect upon, is that now haste perks do not have an issue with specific killer powers like is the case of Clown. As you might remember, a lot of perks in the past had to be nerfed just so they were not absurdly strong on the Nurse, like it was the case with Amol Ears from the Ghostface and Awakened Awareness from Wesker, as buffing them would make those perks must picks for her specifically, but trash on other characters. So now, instead of a buff to Rapid Brutality indirectly buffing Clown and Singularity, this perk can be individually buffed so more killers can use it. Now I do like when perks synergize with killer powers naturally, but if the devs want to go that route of balancing just to make their life easier, then so be it. This even comes with the positive of being able to buff those killers' base kit without having to worry about insane combos. Now Singularity's base kit haste can go to 5% instead of 3%, and this won't result in him being 10% haste when paired with Rapid Brutality. And the same is applied to the hindered status effect of Clown too, so more hindered perks can be made in the future. However, this also comes with a negative. The first one, and most important one, is that a lot of fun meme builds are not possible anymore, like Super Speed Trapper, NASCAR Clown, Wolf Only Dracula, Endgame Legion, Misery Freddy, and many more examples. If you are curious about these builds and how they work, I will be streaming soon in order to showcase all the builds that we will be losing in the next patch. So check that out if you're interested and want to be part of the future video, or wait for the video to come out. The second problem of this is that the changes on the PTB were clearly incomplete. There are a lot of inconsistencies of what is and what isn't a haste mechanic, which we will talk about later on the video, as well as various perks were left completely unusable once the patch comes out, with the biggest example being batteries included, which went from a very fun pick on a lot of my builds to completely useless and with 0 point of being used even on meme builds. Haste perks were very niche, and not a lot of players even used them, as most of the time they were absolute trash, since you trade in generator slowdown and pressure in exchange of being able to down survivors faster, and a lot of speed builds required specific setups in order to work, like hooking your obsession, using expensive add-ons, getting play with your food stacks, or having the survivors do a specific generator with machine learning. They were hard to pull off, but so much fun. Now, instead of stacking haste perks, you can just use one, like the new buffed Unbound, which is actually really good, and instead replace the other haste perks with generator slowdown or with chase oriented builds. The biggest example of this is the new Chuck build, which is not dead. It still exists, and it is still possible to play it with some changes, but I would argue it is even stronger than before, because now you can put on Surge, Fire Up, and Bamboozle instead of play with your food and batteries included, and I felt much stronger in the PTB, at the cost of the build not feeling that much like a meme build as it was in the past. So funnily enough, in terms of viability, this update makes his builds stronger than before. This also sets a very scary precedent for the future of the game. Haste and hindered stacking is no longer a thing, but who is to say that this is the way forward for the balance of the game in other aspects? What if Volt Speed is the next thing that is capped, which would make various perks like Superior Anatomy or Dark Arrogance useless when stacked? What if healing speeds are also capped, preventing combos like Do No Harm with Botany Knowledge to be used, hindering a lot of medic builds? And I won't put generator speeds as an example, because my killer bias would love for that to be capped. You might think that this is fear mongering for the purpose of making my argument stronger, but this is already something that the devs have done with a very niche case. Did you know that Forever Entwined and Fire Up's pickup speed is capped at 42%? According to the devs, it was to prevent breaking certain survivor and killer interactions. Who is to say that we might get in the future a perk that, when stacked with other healing perks, makes survivors heal so fast that it breaks the game, like it happened with original Circle of Healing, or a Volt Speed so fast it breaks the animation of the killers, making them stuck in the vaults. I personally don't think we are at the risk of any of these things being capped yet, but I also believe the same regarding haste perks. Now, my biggest issue with the haste stacking being gone is that I feel like this update was incomplete, and very little was changed to accommodate this massive change. In the case of survivor perks, for example, only 4 haste perks were buffed, and 3 of them were perks that nobody expected a buff with, like Breakout, which is now 10% instead of 7, No One Left Behind, which got its functionality changed, and Champion of Light, which now works individually without fixated. All of these perks are okay, but where is Power of 2 and Blood Pact, the perks that actually only were usable when stacked? Those perks did not get any changes whatsoever, which is weird as this is something that most of us expected. The case is much worse for killers, as not a single add-on was modified to accommodate for these changes, which is really problematic in my opinion. As for the perks, only 2 perks got changed, Furtive Chase and Unbound. As I previously said, I think the buffs to these perks are really nice. Furtive Chase now works like a mini machine learning anytime you hook the obsession, and Unbound is really good when combined with Volt perks, and even by itself, this perk is amazing and can be used on so many killers like Singularity, Myers, Xenomorph or Clown. 10% haste seems to be the sweet spot. However, what about batteries included? The perk which was only used to stack it with other perks like NOED? What about the pathetic effects of Game Afoot? Or how about various of the haste add-ons in the game, like Kaneki's Torture Apparatus add-on, which is now even worse than before, as you can no longer stack it in a meme haste build. And since I mentioned the haste add-on, let's talk about the Addons Problem, because it's a mess if it's released as is from the PTB. In order to understand this next part, it is important for you to know that there are 2 types of haste and hindered effects in the game. The first haste type is the classic one that everyone can see on the right when it is applied, and the same with the hindrance effect. But the game code also contains another type of these perks, which is the movement speed haste and hindrance effect. Did you know that anytime you miss a Deathslinger shot, your speed is reduced due to a secret hindrance effect that is applied on you? This was discovered way back when Alan Wake's Rift came out, and there was a challenge to inflict hindrance on the killers, which you could complete just by having Deathslinger miss a shot. So anytime a killer is slowed down, the game technically counts it as a hindrance. This same logic is applied to movement speed haste. Anytime you get a speed boost, like in the case of Wraith's invisibility, you become faster thanks to a haste effect which does not appear on the right. And this is very important to differentiate because this makes a lot of add-ons completely inconsistent with each other and might cause problems in the future. So in the past, the majority of movement speed perks were the invisible haste bonus, like it was the case with Agitation, Urban Evasion, and Fixated. However, these perks were standardized in order to become haste perks, so now Agitation no longer works with the yellow bottles of the clown, killing the backpack build for example, and the same with Fixated Champion of Light, with the latter being buffed accordingly. However, this same process did not happen to the add-ons, because invisible haste add-ons still exist. For example, the Coffee Grounds add-on for the Trapper will grant him a haste bonus anytime you place a trap, and since it is a visible haste bonus, it no longer stacks with haste perks. But Chag, on the other hand, grants a 7.5% increase of movement speed with the Shoe add-on, and since it is invisible haste, as it does not appear on the right, that means you can still stack this base movement speed with Rapid Brutality. This also happens to both of the movement speed add-ons for Nurse, allowing her to combo it with Unbound, and any other movement speed bonus like Wraith's Windstorm add-ons, Double Engravings Boba, Huntress Soldier Putty, Spirit's Haunting movement speed, and any other movement speed increase you can think of. Funnily enough, this also means that the killer which would have been nerfed the most with this change, Double Rush Speed Blight, is completely unaffected by these changes, as his Rush Speed Haste was once again hidden. And this comes with the problem of some add-ons actually being affected by these changes. The biggest example is Legion's BFFs add-on, which was used with NOED and batteries included in order to walk at 15% speed in the endgame. Since the game considers that haste as a normal effect, this build is completely useless after the patch. The Huntress has two haste add-ons that are also useless now and cannot be stacked, making them completely irrelevant when combined. The same happens with the Clown's Invigoration boosts, as they can no longer affect each other. Ghostface is one of the lucky killers where their meme builds are almost unaffected by these changes. The Dropleg Knife Sheath add-on, which grants 10% haste, still works with the Crouch Movement Speed add-on, as both of these haste effects are considered different in the code. This means Crouch Face is a build that can still be played after the patch, even though it's a bit weaker. This makes haste and hindrance effects affect some killers in a different way, which I consider to be unfair. Skull Merchant can no longer combine well with haste or hindrance since her power grants it by default. Dracula's Send Orbs no longer stack with haste perks. Singularity Slipstream can no longer be boosted more. In the case of hindrance perks, a lot of newer killers also suffer from this. The Houndmaster can no longer combine Hindered with Knockout after Snug stops biting survivors, something that advanced Houndmasters did. Freddy can no longer make his hindrance stronger. Unknown's hindrance on UVX Impact also doesn't stack with any other perk, and most notably, the Clown can no longer stack his purple bottles with Force Hesitation or Nothing But Misery, which were niche builds that were super fun in my opinion. But on the other hand, Blight can rush 10% faster with Machine Learning, Spirit can move around the map faster with Furtive Chase, and Kaneki can slide around the map faster with Haste 2, but the effect is not as impactful. So now that I explained why this change is, in my opinion, unfinished, this is my attempt as a fan of haste builds in order to make this update as best as it can be and also bring back build variety for content creators and for casual players. For the two haste survivor perks, I think the first change that should be done is buff Power of 2 to 7% in order to make it a replacement of the old Blood Pact version, only this time easier to activate as you don't need any obsession shenanigans. 7% is good enough, as having survivors be faster than 110% killers is way too much. Now, as for Blood Pact, I think the perk has proven itself as completely useless for years. Nobody ran this perk before Power of 2 was introduced. It's trash. I do like how this is the only survivor perk that is connected with the obsession status effect, but since this is a major rework, I understand that the devs would need more time to cook up something in the kitchen, so maybe in a future patch we will see a different version of this perk. Batteries is by far the worst offender of these nerfs, as now the 5% haste bonus when near generators is basically useless most of the times, and chasing survivors near completed gens is a bad idea as you want to pressure the unrepaired ones. Additionally, the combo of batteries and NOED is dead, killing a lot of endgame builds. Making this perk 10% haste when you are near repaired generators wouldn't be that bad, as once again you are chasing in a non-optimal spot as a killer, and this perk makes that a bit more viable. That way, it also works in the endgame with NOED instead of giving a pathetic 1% bonus. Game Afoot is the perk that I was the most shocked when I learned that they didn't change anything about it. As for how hard the effect is to get, 5% haste is nothing. Just bumping this up to 10% would make the perk much better, and making it work on power breaks would also boost the effectiveness of this perk much more. For NOED, I would make the 4% haste into a 5% haste, only because I always found it weird how it was 4% instead of 5. Shadowborn, which has a 10% haste, is really good, but like I said on my least used perks video, it's not enough to save the design of this perk. So just like Blood Pact, I think a rework would make this perk way better. And that's about it for perks. I think the rest of perks are good as is. For example, Rapid Brutality, Devour Hope, all Exhaustion perks, all anti-tunnel haste perks, and so on. But add-ons, on the other hand, is what we will focus next. For the Trapper's Coffee add-on, I would first increase the rarity of this add-on to very rare, and replace the spot of Tension Spring, making it yellow. Now, Coffee Grinds will boost the haste whenever a trap is set, and now it comes with a new effect of giving the Trapper a 10% haste boost anytime a survivor falls into a bear trap, so in case they are far away, you can try and reach them faster. This would at least attempt to bring the Speed Trapper playstyle, even when it's still objectively worse than before. For the Huntress 2 haste add-ons, since they cannot be stacked anymore, I would combine both of them into one, so the Leather Loop add-on will now grant 5% haste for each hatchet hit. Now, as for the Infantry build, I would rework it with a new effect, which would grant you 1 extra hatchet for each survivor you injure with a fully charged hatchet. That way, you have a 1 in the chamber playstyle with Iridescent Head, and you also have new potential challenges where you cannot reload with a locker as a Huntress. The hatchet needs to be fully charged in order to give survivors some time in order to dodge an Iridescent Head, and to prevent this add-on from being busted in unhooked situations so the hatchets cannot be spammed. The same treatment will be given to the Clown's add-ons. For the cheap gin bottle, both of the invigoration effects will be stacked, so it is now a 5% extra instead of 3%, and Sticky Soda bottle will be reworked. Now you get all of your bottles reloaded once you hook a survivor. I think this could be a cute effect, saving you some time after you down a survivor. Not very game changing, so it's fitting for the rarity of the add-on. Now, as for the BFFs Legion add-on, I have two alternatives in mind. The first one is to make the haste 10% individually, and that way you at least can use this as a weaker version of endgame Legion, but without batteries included, so you get an extra perk slot. The other idea I had is to make this perk 6% movement speed just like the Hack Shoe add-on, and that way you can stack this perk with batteries included for a 16% boost in the endgame, 1% more than before. But if batteries were to be not buffed, then it would still be a 11% haste bonus, so at the very least it's kinda usable in the endgame. And finally, let's do a quick rundown of all the minor haste add-ons that you probably didn't even know existed because they are very niche. Xenomorph's Parker Headband will now grant a 10% haste bonus for 3 seconds once coming out of a tunnel, so now it is at least usable. It will be the Xenomorph's version of the fingernail add-on for Sadako. Chucky's Running Shoes add-on is now 5% haste after Scamper for 5 seconds, so the effect will be much more noticeable. This will allow Chucky players to hit some scampers which were before impossible. Vecna's Boots of Speed should give 7% haste for 3 seconds after casting Mage Hand. This way, it is a soft counter to the item survivors get to counter Mage Hand. It would still not be as good, since Vecna slows himself down when casting this spell. Houndmaster's Sticky Pitch add-on should be buffed to be 5% at least, as 2% is basically nothing and you can no longer stack it with anything. And finally, for Torture Apparatus for the Ghoul, I have the problem of not wanting to give this killer a buff, while at the same time wanting this add-on to be good so there is build variety. Since losing the Enrage mode is so rare in game, I would make it so that this perk is a mini furtive chase effect where you get a 10% haste and 10 seconds of undetectable whenever it is activated, and that way you have the choice of losing the Enrage mode intentionally in order to get the effects of this perk, or helping you get a survivor after the effects have ran out. This change would make this add-on so much better and worthy of a very rare slot. As for any other add-ons and perks that I didn't mention, I think they are okay the way they currently are, like Made for This, Hope, Iridescent Photocard, or Drop Legs Knife Sheath. With all these changes, I feel like the perks and add-ons would be able to work by themselves and be a viable pick in some builds, which in turn compensates for the amount of builds we will be losing once this patch hits live. Let me know what you think of these changes, and if you disagree on any of my suggestions, please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.